I'm on record for claiming these types of videos are some of my favorite on the internet. There's just so much to look at. These videos are by Maps in a Nutshell. Now, this is one of the most popular shorts in this format, and that really makes my heart happy because it's about the Franco Prussian War, a less talked about conflict. But remember how impactful this would be because it finally unified Germany. I mean, this quite literally is the reason why the German nation exists today, and, well, why all the events that followed that took place as well, I guess you could say. The World Wars. But to see this conflict play out from a map perspective, obviously you can see that the Germans are definitely outnumbering the French here. Not very much, but slightly, and here they are moving through. Now, at this point, there wasn't a Maginot Line. Everyone knows about that. These defensive fortifications were really built after the Great War or World War I. Not that this was really gonna help all that much, but so immediately you can see that the Germans quickly got into French territory. Like, they are already pretty deep in, and they just weren't ready for this. Part of the reason is purely a numbers. Now, obviously, there's more than just numbers that count in terms of war. Actually, there's a lot more that goes into play than just troop count. But that was clearly a factor here in the very beginning because there's like a 300,000 difference. And the Germans, well, the Germans had already pushed in even before they had the numerical advantage. Numerical, is that the word? Bam, are they already in Paris? I wish this had like a date though, exactly at what point. This is really fascinating because it's one of the only times Germany didn't try to move through Belgium to get into France. They just straight up went through France. Bam, and clearly this is when the French knew, all right, we need to make sure that this never happens again. Remember, this really, I mean, it's like a prequel. It's a prequel war to the World Wars, so this really shows why the French decided to adopt the military policies and doctrines that they did following in the 1900s. Damn, they got all the way up to Normandy. Napoleon I conquers vast amounts of Europe and defeats the rest of the continent multiple times. Meanwhile, his nephew, I don't really want to bag on Napoleon III because everyone kind of does. I don't think he did horrible the entire time, but this was not the greatest look for him. Of course, it was going to be really difficult for him to live up to his uncle. One thing everyone seems to be talking about when it comes to this video is just the number of encirclements Bismarck was doing. Him and Wilhelm leading Germany at the time. I mean, he knew about the Hoi 4 strategies before Hoi 4 was even coming out, like 150 years literally before all that. Let's cut to almost 100 years later and on the exact opposite end of the globe, the Vietnam War, which was actually, funny enough, also connected to France. So we have the North Vietnamese or the communist side and the Southern Vietnamese, the democratic side supported by the US. They are going to be using a lot of territory through Laos and through Cambodia, and this was a big issue because they would be attacking from across the border. And just look how far back behind enemy lines they already are. So there's going to be a lot of bombing that takes place here, both in Vietnam and in Cambodia and in Laos. So they finally stopped the capital. They momentarily halted the chaos in Saigon. But yeah, we're really going to see how impactful that Ho Chi Minh Trail really was. Oh, good, we have alliance forces here. You can see South Korean flags, US flags. The Australians are going to be here somewhere. So obviously that Vietnamese yellow flag is not seen or used in Vietnam here, but you can see it a lot in California. Oh, bam, there we go. So Cambodia is now somewhat involved with Laos because of the trail. Oh, look at Thailand too getting involved. The full list that helped the South Vietnamese: New Zealand, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, the Philippines, Taiwan, and then on the other side you got the Soviets, North Korea, China, Grunk. The hell's Grunk? Baby Grunk? I just really wish we had a date to figure out exactly what happened here. So there's gonna be chaos that ensues inside of Cambodia, and the US are probably getting ready to leave soon. US and allied forces, yeah, they're out. These shorts make it seem like it was like a quick process. I mean, this took place over the course of years, a decade, 2 decades. I mean, it really started in Vietnam immediately after World War II. The Vietnamese were fighting the French at the time. So fascinating to see just how many North Koreans and South Koreans participated in that conflict. It's because it was looking like the exact same thing was going to happen to Vietnam at that time. The North would be communist, the South would be democratic. I use that word democratic here pretty loosely. But you could see how American logic played out here. They figured the exact same thing would happen here in Vietnam that happened in the Korean Peninsula just like a decade earlier. But they was wrong. Here we go, the Mexican-American War. Now, I've never seen a map in this video format talk about this conflict like this. It's definitely going to be revealing just how small the battles really were in the American continents just compared to the old world. There's hundreds of thousands of people over there. I don't even think that either side's going to get over 100,000. I mean, look, the Americans have 17,000 versus Mexico with 33,000. Remember, this is not that much earlier than that Franco Prussian War video that we started off with. This was only like 30 years before that. Really interesting how like Mexico had practically practically nothing up here protecting the modern day states of Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, California. I mean, you can see a couple of stragglers get there, but most of the front lines were taking place along the Texas borders. We all know how this is going to play out. Look at that. I mean, they kind of just claimed this territory with, what, 2 flags? And there's more than 2 flags here, but 12 people? Of course, the vast majority of fighting was always going to take place around here. Mexico still has the numerical advantage, but that's not really going to mean much because, yeah, well, they're going to pour in. I don't know if those are encirclements that are really going on. I mean, this war just kind of seems chaotic. Just like, you know, get on a horse, stab 3 people, and you just claimed an entire state territory now. Crazy that the total amount of people each side had was still under 100,000. I was gonna say Hollywood should make more movies about this subject, but they are never gonna touch this. The only thing I can remember is the Alamo movie from like 20 years ago. So boom, they've already grabbed pretty much the states, and now they're going to march their way down to Mexico City. Basically, here they are landing in, I believe that's gonna be Veracruz, and they're continuing to pack people in from the East Coast, getting them into modern-day Texas, but they're pretty deep into modern-day Mexican territory now. Remember that Mexico's a very mountainous area, too. That fighting would have been pretty chaotic. Here are the Americans just defending this land. Yeah, they're going to march all the way through. This is actually kind of similar to the way we saw that Franco Prussian War play out. Getting to the capital, and then it was a wrap. 1 flag equals about 1,000 soldiers. A wise man once said, "It doesn't matter how many troops you have, it matters where they're stationed." Here's a very important battle during World War I, the siege of Leningrad. This became one of the longest and most destructive sieges in world history, which obviously means the casualty count is unimaginable. That Axis encirclement was insane. Don't forget the Finland cameo we're gonna see here. This video is obviously starting off around 1941 after Operation Barbarossa, because that's when the Germans actually started attacking the Soviet Union. This is where really the Eastern Front begins and how brutal that was going to be. So Finland is up here in the north. Finland is located right this way, kind of an extension to the Winter War, and the Germans, well, I'm sure they're Germans up here more than likely. Wow, there's only 185,000 Finns up this way, but meanwhile, 3/4 of a million. I'm sure the Germans had to have been making it over here. And the Soviets are trying their best. Again, the Soviets' key factor is they needed time. They needed time to organize their divisions, build the thousands of T-34s that they were eventually going to build. And remember, this is only one focus. We're focusing on just Leningrad, but the Eastern Front was massive. Leningrad is all the way up here in the very north, but I mean, there was fighting going on all throughout this country. So many people put emphasis on Stalingrad because that was a giant turning point in the war, but Leningrad is just as important. And now we're finally going to see the Soviets step in and push them out. I mean, you can see, look at the German troop count just continue to dwindle, whereas the Finns seem to be still pretty high relatively, but the Germans had to, yeah, just explosion. I mean, remember, Germany was fighting literally all over Europe, so seeing their troop numbers dwindle is not shocking. Hilter casually talking about unemployment rates in the background. Didn't even know that. And here's everyone's favorite with 22 million views, the Korean War, just because of how drastic the front lines got. And again, it's all in 60 seconds, so you're gonna see like, look at the North Koreans immediately push the South Koreans just to this very corner. They was literally just stuck in the South Korean city of Busan, pretty much. Things didn't start off good, but luckily the Americans were going to have some reinforcements. That's a very interesting detail, them landing here and taking Seoul back, way back behind enemy lines, only with like 40,000 troops. And then the numbers now start to dwindle. China is now going to get involved, and oh boy. And this is right around the time Douglas MacArthur's like, hey, what if we nuked them? All right, yeah, the radiated nuclear coal bait. The Chinese have an insane amount of numbers. I mean, dang, there's not like a massive advantage they have right now. It's another, I mean, 500,000. It is quite a bit, but that is really going to be their big contributing factor here. And this is where things slow down a bit. Luckily, the Americans get more troops here. This is really, from the things that I've read, the first time like helicopter warfare began. Everyone puts a lot of emphasis on helicopters in Vietnam, but choppers are really important in this conflict. For the first time, they weren't really there in World War II. So they're going to settle along the 38th parallel. Here we go, the Chinese with even more troops. Are the flags just China? Because of course the Soviets were also helping the North Koreans. I wonder why they decided to hide all the, I mean, yeah, the communist bloc. This was quite the Avengers team the South Koreans had formed, though, to help on their side. It'd be very interesting if, obviously, the Americans had naval dominance, but it's interesting because, 1.6 million troops on one side, but they're still having to fight on a relatively small peninsula. It's not like a large flat map where you can do a lot of I mean, maybe maybe encircling. Obviously, it's still a peninsula that's massive, but the troop numbers on both sides here, I have to think the fact that they're just fighting on a strip of land made a big difference. Wow, look, the Chinese are still coming in. There's still more flowing in, and China's gonna have like an unlimited amount. It's impressive though, because China had just got done fighting so many wars against the Japanese versus themselves. Actually, it started off themselves, the Japanese, themselves again. Then on the Korean Peninsula, North Korea, we're losing. How many soldiers can you send? Yes. China spamming troops without cooldown. It's incredible how both Koreas at some point were very close to winning, taking the whole peninsula. But here we are, like 75 years later, and it's still very much divided. Thanks for that, Maps in a Nutshell. Big thanks to my patrons this month. I tried to kidnap Drew again, but he put me in his basement. Help. Drew's Argentinian Grandpa. I can't sleep. I'm back, without boys. Drew's voice. Nord, Tyler, Archaeology, aPhatNarwhal, Carmel,
Sarsath,
Pavlik,
DOOCHBAGGINS,
Fredrik Tibblin,
JohnDenver,
KansasWasMentioned, KingBearHaze, LuxembourgLover,
the sebby. If you hear this, I